Okay, this is part 2 of the OOPEx002. We had finished the toString method and we had changed the format in which it returns a string. We now went across to question 3. Question 3 states create a method which will decrement the copies field. Now, when getting asked to create methods, you're looking for two different items. One, you're looking for, is it receiving anything? Just let me pause for a second because my class is being distracted. From there, so we're looking for what it receives or what it returns. Now in this specific instance, it's not receiving anything and it's also not returning anything. So with looking at those two things, we can defaultly assume that a method is public. If it doesn't state otherwise, we can assume it's public. And the second, after we say it's public, we need to now say what it returns. In this question, it says it doesn't mention anything about returning, it returns nothing, so you say the word void. And the term void means that this method is not going to return anything. So now, after we've made it void, we must give it the name. So we give it the name that was given to us. And now in the brackets here, we would add any parameters, and this is what we would need to send through or receive. This method would receive. Again, nothing is received. So we'll just create their method. Now what it should actually do is decrement the number of copies. Now to do that, you would say copies is equal to copies minus 1. Now this is the long way around of doing it. Java has created a nice shortcut where we can literally just go minus minus. So copies is equal to copy minus 1. Let me zoom in on this. Is the equivalent of going copies minus minus. It is the exact same thing. It is changing the value of copies by a -1. So now the next question says create a method called new copy which will increment the copies field. So it's the exact same thing. This time instead of decrementing, we're incrementing. Again, we're not receiving anything, we're not returning anything, so it's void, and it is. Again, copies is equal to copies plus 1, or the short method would be just to go plus plus. This is the short method of incrementing by 1. Now the next question is a little bit more of a detailed method that it's asking for. In this scenario, it's a bit strange to have, but when we increase the library, we just get more books of the exact same books that we've got, which doesn't make much sense, but it's what this library does. So what happens is here, it's asked me to create a method called upsize, which will receive through a number representing the percentage in which the library is going to expand. This method should then return the number of copies that needs to be purchased to adhere to the upsizing. So now, there's a couple of things that I mentioned that you need to pay attention to on every single class or method you create. You need to pay attention to what it is receiving, and you need to pay attention to what it is returning. In this case, it is receiving a number representing the percentage, and it is returning a number, which is the number of copies that it that needs to be returned. Sorry, this is actually a bit larger than what the screen is, which is not very clever. So it's missing out a whole bunch of sentences. So let's just make that so it fits better. Okay, so we return the number of copies that has been purchased for the upsizing. Okay, so now to start off with this, public, and remember, so it's, because it wasn't stated differently, we always assume that it will be public, the method. So in this case, public, what data type is it going to return? It is returning a integer. Then we give it the name that was given to us. It then asks what it will receive. The next thing we need is a parameter, and we're going to receive through the percentage in which the percentage in which the library is going to expand. So I'm going to receive a numerical value representing the percentage of expansion. I'm making it quite a long variable name. You guys can make it much shorter. I'm just making it long so you can understand that this will be receiving through the percentage. I do always suggest you give your variable names logical names so that you understand what it is referring to. The next thing that we moving here is we are wanting to upscale our library by that size and also return. Sorry, we don't actually need to change the value. We just need to return the number of copies that we need to be purchased. So we need to create a variable called new copies. What I always suggest, sorry, before I go into that, I need to return an integer here. So what I always suggest is you create a blank variable of, you need to create a blank variable. So we declare and initialize a temporary variable of the data type that we need to return. We then go ahead and return that blank variable. The reason why you do that is because it makes this method now sound. So even if you don't get the calculation or whatever you need to do in the method correct, you would get the method structure correct, because you have created a variable to hold the value you need to return, and you've returned it. So you've gotten yourself marks, but also you're keeping a logical structure. You've created a temporary variable to hold the whatever you need to in that method, and you're returning it, which is good. Now we actually need to come up with a number of copies. So the number of copies to purchase, we need to take the current copies, we need to multiply it by the percentage of expansion, and because the percentages is a whole value, so 20 would be 20%, we need to divide it by 100. Just to note that, so if I receive through 20, so if there were 7 copies and we wanted to expand by 20%, we would times it by 20 and we would divide by 100. A good scenario if you're battling how to solve a problem, just come up with example data and work out the problem yourself, and then you can just convert it into the actual variable values in the case. In this case, I came up with the example of 7 copies and 20%. So I worked out the calculation on how I would do it in my head, and then I just converted it into variables instead of that. So this would be an EG. Alright, and // represents a comment, which means that it's not going to actually be executed. It's just a statement there. Okay, so we've got all our class working now. Our book class does everything we want it to do. So the next section is going to be actually creating the user interface. So I'm going to pause this video while we discuss and make sure everyone's up to that, and then I'll continue this video just now.